Hi everyone! So one question that I receive over and over quite often, both on my stream and on YouTube, is why am I still playing Diablo 3, or why am I still playing this season? How do I stay motivated? And I felt this was probably a good topic for a video to talk about at some point. So here we go. I want to explain a little bit about how I play Diablo 3 or other games in general, and maybe you can take something away for yourself if you find yourself having trouble staying motivated, or staying on course for your goals and getting anywhere with your progression. So just as a little point of reference, this season I have played roughly 400 hours plus minus, depending on how much time I spent in menu. So we are at around 2 months in. I just had a 2.5 weeks break as well because I was on vacation. So it was roughly like 6 weeks or so to accumulate just 400 hours. For some people that's quite a lot, for some other people this is basically nothing. So overall I'm definitely one of those people that play the game quite a bit, but definitely not as much as like some of the really high-end blasters that are like Paragon 7K at this point. So for me this is totally fine. Usually I don't have like the highest of goals. Usually I just want to complete certain milestones. For example, this season I've done the 150 solo Wave of Light Monk, and then I've also done another 150 with the Inner Monk. So that was pretty cool. And I also want to go for the Firebird 150, which I actually started pushing now. So I had the goal before I started the season to do 150 with the Monk and the Wizard. And I did have this goal because at some point I want to have all classes 150 solo completed. I've already done the DH, the Necro and the Crusader in season 19, 21 and 22. And this season is a very good opportunity to do 150 solo with basically every single class. So I chose those two to kind of check mark those two classes, and we'll see what the future holds for other buffs or season themes or whatever might be coming for the Witch Doctor and the Barbarian, but this is something to keep for later for now. Usually I play somewhere between 300 to 600 hours every season when I play it actively, so I'm basically on track to reach that number again with something like 400 hours, maybe 450 hours in the end of my profile, and there will be some other stuff going on. So I already know for myself how much I can handle, how much I want to play, and at some point I just don't really want to grind much more and wait for the next season. This is mostly because I simply don't enjoy the Paragon grind very much, so most of the time I just like to get the Paragons out of the way as fast as possible. So you might have seen my 1 week progression update where I was already Paragon 3, almost 3.5k, basically the Paragon I have almost. And since then I have no progress in my Paragons. I've just been farming gear, farming keys, doing bounties, and then push all the different builds. So I've done a lot of pushes on the Monk, I've done all the different leaderboards on the Monk and got some pretty good results there for some time at least, and they are still up here in most cases. Personally, I don't really care much about the actual GR number that I'm clearing with my builds. I just want to play the build and get a good clear, and in some cases like the Wave of Light Monk where I literally spent thousands of keys, I want to make sure that I have almost the best clear possible. So I want to learn the build properly, and it does take dozens of hours, even hundreds of hours in some cases, to really master a build. You have to learn about the different monster types, about the different maps, about the different strategies, when to use a pylon, what it leads to fight, which affixes, etc. So there is a lot of RNG in this game, and you have to learn how to play around all these different types of RNG with each individual build. Even for someone like me who has played basically 100 builds and pushed them with like hundreds of keys over the many seasons so far, there is still many things to learn, and every time a new build comes around there are more things to understand about the game, about how the builds work, about how we can progress, and there's just little nuances between the different builds that are really exciting to explore for me. I've already talked about similar points in another video after my 150 clear of the Monk, so I'm not gonna elaborate too much on this, but in the end for me I just want to do the best clear possible with the character I have, and most of the time you can only really start doing this end game push after you have reached a certain like progression milestone with your character's equipment, legendary gems and paragons. I know a lot of people stop playing the season much earlier than this and they're kind of done, but most of the time this leads to the problem that you cannot really experience the build and learn the build in the way it's supposed to be played in the end game if you stop too early. So if you're like Paragon 900 or even 1200 or something, most of the time you cannot really play the real setup, you cannot really play as aggressively as you should. You might be lacking the right gear to really have the right area damage values on all your items, and all these things that might seem just like basic DPS buff actually lead to different gameplay and different strategies and make the game more exciting as you push higher. It's a bit difficult to explain what exactly I mean here, but most of the time being too low in the progression will lead to the fact that you cannot really do this crazy push that I like to do sometimes with hundreds of keys. Because first of all, it's not worth doing it, because when you're at a point where like Paragon 1500, you can so easily farm up another 1, 2 tiers, 3 tiers of character power to be able to beat the next tier, that it's not really worth investing all this time into the actual push. So essentially, the lower you are, the faster you want to complete your push, to the point where it's simply not worth wasting time, not even wasting half an hour or 1 hour on the actual push, because you can just use that 1 hour to farm so much more character power. And obviously, the higher you go with your paragons, the less character power per time spent you gain, which means that somewhere down the line you will reach the point where pushing more becomes better than farming more. And this is usually where I will start. Now, this was a lot of specifics about myself and how I play the game. I am very focused on solo pushing, but it's also more general things that I want to talk about. How do you stay motivated for the grind in general? In order to understand this, I felt it was important to explain how I play the game, because it is all about goals. So Diablo 3 and basically any ARPG and any other very grinding based game, doesn't even have to be the same genre, is focused on goals. If you just play the game and grind for grinding's sake, you will not have a lot of fun. The progression is very slow, it is designed to be slow. You don't really feel the impact of this 2% damage upgrade that you might find from a lucky drop after 30 hours of grinding T16, and you don't really notice that much of a difference from grinding another 100 paragons in a dozen hours and you gain like 3% damage. So overall, the progression just doesn't feel very impactful after you have done the initial like 10, 20, 30 hours of the season where you get rapid upgrades all the time. So during that time, it's always the most fun part of the season. Obviously, everyone is playing there, everyone is having fun, you get frequent upgrades, your dopamine levels are through the roof, but you also have to stay focused on the actual goal and not lose sight of that, because else you're gonna lose all your motivation at once. It doesn't matter if you want to do a solo 150 or a solo 130 or even a solo 100 or whatever goal you have in mind for yourself. Obviously, for me, I have so much experience with the game that I understand extremely well what I require to reach a certain goal, and I know beforehand how many hours I need to invest in this step, in that step, how many keys I need, how many bounties I need, how many paragons I need. I know all of this with plus minus, let's say 90% accuracy, because I know pretty much exactly how the progression works with all the different builds and how strong they are. I also know really well how many keys I will need to beat this or that tier with the character I have at that point. So that is also not really a surprise to me. Sometimes I know exactly that I will go in and I will need around 2000 keys. Might be 3000, might be 1500, who knows, but the ballpark number is the same. So for someone who is not so experienced with the game, it might be a bit more difficult to actually set those goals beforehand, because you might not actually understand or know how many hours you will need for this, how many hours for that, how you can deal with the RNG of loot and gear acquisition and all these kinds of things. But that shouldn't prevent you from making a goal to begin with. And maybe you'll find it so exciting, or maybe you reach a goal so fast that you just want to keep going, and you can set a new goal from there, and you have a better understanding at that point of how much more time you will need to actually reach another goal. So if you start out and you want to push your, let's say 130, and you realize, oh, Inner is so good, it was so easy, so let's go 135 or let's go 140. So this is definitely valid, and this is also something that I do myself sometimes. I just increase the amount of goals or the scope of the goals to include more stuff. As long as you have the goal in mind and a basic understanding of how long it will take, you will not so easily lose motivation, even in very unlucky streaks. For example, I've been playing my wizard now. I got all my gear super fast. It took me like 10 hours or something to basically get really good ancient gear in every slot, but I don't have any ethereals. So I've been trying for another 30 hours farming any ethereals. Then I've been trying to do some bounties. I found like 1500 bounty materials. Took me like 3 evenings and I got basically nothing out of it. This just happens, and this is part of the RNG of such games, but this is also a totally expected result, and that is important to note. Getting bad RNG and getting unlucky with your items and trying to reforge a compass rose that you have no hope of ever receiving a good roll of is just part of the game and totally expected. And you cannot let this drag you down and demotivate you. So you have to be aware that when you start the process of farming a compass rose, that you'll most likely end up with 2000 bounty mats spent for absolutely nothing. It might also happen sometimes that some unforeseen events happen, maybe in your life. Maybe you just have to skip goals or stop playing entirely because of certain events. Or maybe you start a season and you're super motivated and you realize that your build is not really great, or you just don't like it very much, or maybe your group that you started with falls apart more quickly than anticipated and just push you off track in unexpected ways. So in that case, obviously you can always adjust your goals as well. So either you abandon them or you just lower the scope, similar to how sometimes I increase my scope, and this is totally fine doing. Everyone has their own limits, everyone has their different life events happening to them, and this is also just an expected part of the journey. For myself, I have found a way to make a scope of goals that is realistic for me and that is not too high and not too low, to the point where I just enjoy the ride and I enjoy going for those goals. I enjoy achieving new milestones in this game every single season, and mostly I do this for myself and then I like sharing it with the world. It also does happen that I just can't do all the things that I wanted to do. For example, the Diablo 2 release is around the corner, so this is just a few more days at this point. I have to finish my 150 Firebirds. This is like the #1 priority now. And then I want to do some other pushes on a wizard, but I just can't get the items that I want for it, so they're gonna be a bit scuffed. But I'm gonna just put them there with what I have, and that's it. So sometimes you just have to accept defeat and just go with what you have. But these were secondary targets to begin with, and then we have more goals coming up with the Diablo 2, and then next season, next PTR, there's gonna be some new builds, there's gonna be some new exciting stuff, and we'll see about that. So this is what I have to share about this topic. I hope that you could take something for yourself from this. My main point is that you have to make goals, and you can't just start playing the game randomly and jump in without any kind of pursuit, in my opinion. And with this, at least for me, it's not so difficult to just keep coming back season after season, enjoying the ride, enjoying the early season progression where everything is super fast and fun, and then eventually you enter this grind mode and you have to grind away very slowly, getting your levels, getting your gear, preparing for the push, and finally doing that push and fighting against the RNG. So I hope you took something for yourself out of this. Let me know how it is for you, or maybe just your impressions. I'd be curious to hear about how other people do this as well, because this is mostly just my inner workings, so to say, and just something that I wanted to get out and explain a bit more in depth in the video. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and see you guys next time.